All right. I
Yeah,
think,
okay.
yeah, there we go. I think we're live streaming now. It's going to redirect. I'm waiting for it to redirect me to the page. So if anybody's watching, for those of you that haven't seen these videos, yeah, there we go. For those of you that haven't seen these videos before, this is a bi-weekly call I do to support people that we work with here. And I try to make it themed. I try to make it follow up from the previous lives that you guys have seen in the group so that there's some continuity. And I also try to make this stand alone just in case you're hopping in and this is the first thing that you've seen. So in this call, I have with me, I don't know if you guys can see here because of how Zoom works, but I have with me a client of mine named Raquel. She's in Australia. Some others may be hopping on as we go through. This is just the support call that I provide for all my clients, whether you're a member or whether you're a one-on-one private client. And last time, in the last live in this group, we focused on intention setting, which is a big part of the practice that, oh, wow, people are already commenting. Okay, hi. A big part of the practice that, I can't pause myself. Okay. It's a big part of the practice that we do every single day that we call mindset mastery. So, Raquel, I know you're just sitting there listening, and people are looking at my goofy face, and I know that they can't see you. So you may
Yeah.
not see Raquel, guys, but she's here, and I'd love it if you could share a little bit with me and people who are watching about how you have. I mean, you've gone through some huge changes in the past few weeks that have all come down to intention setting. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. Gosh, it's hard for me to gather my thoughts because I had such a profound experience I've been 5 weeks in India,
Mm,
and I think about what was my intention for when I went to India, and I didn't really. This was, by the way, was my fifth trip to India, so it wasn't my first rodeo. But
hmm
but I had to really be very much in allowance, I guess, for my trip to India. But my overall intention for really since I've been on the program has been about how do I connect to my flow state,
Yes.
um, and how do noticing how um, I feel better and act better, do better, function better, all those things when I'm actually in that state. So, a state of what would I would say is the antithesis of pushing, right? The
Mm,
antithesis of trying, even. And actually, really the antithesis of doing.
mm,
So my work on the program has really been about, not that like I'm capable. I've always been capable of accessing that flow state, but prioritizing that flow state has been a very different matter. Um, and um, as a result, I think of holding that intention when I went to India, I discovered that when I'm in flow state, because I'm always in flow state when I'm traveling, I discovered how magnetic I am when I'm in flow. So up until that point, I'd just been discovering how happy I felt in flow and um, how how personally rewarding and satisfying it was for me to be in flow. But when I was in India, I discovered how magnetic I am in flow, and that has probably helped shift me into, let's say, a bigger world picture, maybe.
yeah. Yeah. I could see that. And regardless of whether you're focused on the program or just the past year or a few months of your life, like that experience in India, as you said, um, this magnetic sense of being in flow, it creates an awareness that you didn't have before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I have always known that I'm different when I travel. I've always known that. that you know, people respond to me differently when I travel, but I've never been able to really understand that as um, a magnetism that actually has um, benefit beyond just my own personal satisfaction.
So what is the benefit then?
Well, I'm yet to understand completely, but it feels like it's definitely a universal um, collective benefit. So something that, in terms of my contribution,
Hmm.
um, and I think I've always, you know, contribution is a very important concept and word to me. You know, how do I contribute? But it's always felt very one-on-one, my contribution, and I've always enjoyed that, actually, the fact that I can make a difference to one person. Um, but somehow that India experience, and it's actually too big yet for me to feel brave enough to go there, but I can see that that's where I need to go,
Into that magnetic place.
into that place of big magnetism, like world affecting magnetism, not just one-on-one personal. You know, that's the safe zone that I've been occupying, is changing people's lives, you know, in intimate ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And how can I do that with a bigger, with a bigger intention? So I guess that's my next step.
Right. And you even said that you think that you or you know that you need to take that next step. Like it's very clear to you that that's a
Totally.
need,
Yes.
right? And so I was having a call recently with both you and with another I'm surprised he hasn't been on one of these live calls actually. Another fellow that we work with, his name is Peter. You guys will see if you're watching this in the group, you'll see his video soon. I'm having some tech problems getting it together, but there's a video that's coming up from him of an interview that we did. And he's made light years of improvement since then. But I've had a call with both you and Peter recently where we've talked about how what you can see from that place of, I'll call it fulfillment, right? So for everybody it's different. Maybe, for him it's not magnetism in the same sense that for you it is. But in that state, in that natural state, we can see certain things that we couldn't see otherwise. And
Yes.
we can I think that one of those things is not only what we need for our lives, but what we want to bring into our lives when we're not in that state. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would absolutely. You know, it highlights what we not what we're missing, but what we don't what we kind of ignore, I think. And it highlights that and says, really, do you want to keep ignoring that and pushing that out into the corner each time that you get stressed, or which obviously takes, we go backwards.
Yeah.
We
So
forget we
that
forget us.
we exactly we forget ourselves. And have you had that kind of experience of having like this peak state? I'll call it peak state. That's actually a good phrase
Mhm,
for it. Um,
mhm.
and we use a terminology, and I'm happy to talk about some of the practices that we do because one of the things that we do every day is we check in on our power, and it's actually a practice for every moment too. Um,
Yeah.
so when we have high power or peak state, do you find that you fall from that place sometimes, or that you like you were just saying, in those lower power times, may fall backwards?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, even I've had just a bit of the last couple of days of just been um, a state of slightly lower power, where I just haven't wanted to move go as quickly as what I would like, and it's been a bit sludgy.
Yep.
Um, and And I noticed that, you know, the kind of the default was, you know, kind of getting annoyed at myself that I wasn't progressing as, you know, fast or as far as I would like.
Yeah.
And then there was the, hang on a sec, how am I doing?
Oh,
What's happening here?
you weren't actually
Right?
saying, hang on a sec. Yeah, yeah.
No, no, hang on a sec, to myself. What, you know, like what am I like? What's my power?
Hmm.
And when I actually acknowledge, oh yeah, I actually just don't have a lot of doing, as much doing, let's say, as what I would normally have, and um, I need to adjust my expectations of my day according to
Yeah.
that, so that, you know, I'm not spending the day or even the end of the day chastising myself because I didn't get as far as I would have liked, or pushed and actually did a bad job or whatever. I've just gone, no, my power's a bit low today. That's I'm doing something else with, you know, my power is being used in another way. For me, often my power is used for emotional processing or for catching up on, you know, and I'm not doing that necessarily consciously. I just have to acknowledge that some of my power is being used for something else that might not be on my to-do list. You know?
Exactly. Right. And so then we have to look at like how those things on our to-do list come to be and how those things
Mm,
on our to-do list when we have low power get chosen.
mm,
So I wonder for you, like, um, and it's maybe something I pull out the whiteboard for, but I wonder for you how your mindset and your priorities shift in a state of low power compared to, say, that peak state, that magnetic state,
mm,
that state where you know what you need, you know what you want, and that's super clear. Do you know what
mm.
you need and what you want in the state of low power as well, as clearly?
No, because I tend to be far more aware of all the things I would like to be doing if I had high power. Um,
So it's almost like
and
how would you describe that feeling of, it's not regret, it's like a future regret
mm,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Grief?
Well, I think what it happens that is it just it's such a major distraction, and
Hmm.
because it actually keeps me from doing anything if I stayed doing that, because I'd be like, well, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that and I don't want to do that. And I'm, you know, I'm trying this and it's taking 5 times longer than I would like, or, you know, and all those sorts of things. So then the to-do list starts to actually grow exponentially, just because time-wise, I can see how much longer everything would take.
Yeah, and you
Um,
start to move into the details. And what would you call that emotion though? Is that like
Depressed.
grief? Depressed? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would definitely, like, it's depressing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm a great one for, you know, trying to, let's say, set depression aside, because it, you know, it certainly doesn't help if you wallow in it or go into it. But it's definitely it's definitely a low level. And you're right, it has that tinge of regret. It's not regret, but it has that tinge of failure, right? That
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fail, like you say, future regret. I'm going to fail, or I am a failure.
Hmm.
Um, and those kinds of feelings really are, you know, a recipe for not getting anything done.
They are. And
Mhm.
how do you know? Let's take a strip of time. Let's say a week. And
Mhm.
throughout that week, you're in peak state sometimes, and then you're not sometimes. And when you're not, you have this sense of regret, depression,
Mhm.
failure. When you are, you have this sense of magnetism and flow. How do you know unequivocally that the two just don't cancel each other out? I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, and then I'm going to do a little teaching piece.
Well, I'm human, and
Well, that's
so
fair. Yeah, you are. It's true.
so so things. So I'm never, you know, I can't. And actually, so my own personal ambition, goal, whatever, is that, you know, I am more transparent around my emotions to myself and to others. So not always putting on that mask, that good face of everything's
Hmm.
okay, or I'm a bloody amazing, you know, superwoman thing, because I am pretty much a superwoman a lot of the time, let's admit it. But but there has to actually, like, I think to be a superwoman, you also, or super person, you have to, superhero, you have to acknowledge that you have a flaw, you have Achilles heels. So for
So
me,
totally.
that's what I mean by human, is like, I can't be great at it all the time. I need time to be vulnerable, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'm not actually, I
Then
don't,
why is
I
then
love
why
my
then why
vulnerability. I love my vulnerability and I love my superhumanness.
so can I challenge you a little?
Go ahead.
Then go ahead. I have no choice, right? Um, why then why get depressed if you know that you're human? Like, does that work in a state of low power?
The depression happens more or less automatically. You know, like it's what you and I call sit, right? It's that it's the programming that has happened, you know, from either culture, society, or family, around the failure to do, right, and the lack
Mhm.
of appreciation of the being in our culture. So, you know, I had
Right.
a very different experience in India, although it is a very quite busy culture. My experience, because I spent quite a bit of time in ashrams, I was following swamis, and swamis were following me around, and I was watching the way they walked, and I
Hmm.
was like, oh dude, no, because I'd fall one day. I've been watching this swami for ages. He didn't have very much English, but he taught me so much. He taught me so much. He was unbelievable. And I've been hanging around with him for about a week. And then one day I was running late for the prayer puja, arti as they
Hmm.
call it. And I was in a little rickshaw, and I got out of the rickshaw, and because I was looking ahead, oh no, it was night, it was dark, looking ahead and not down as I normally would do, and it was dark. There was this little bump, like a little road bump, in the speed bump in the entrance, and I'd never noticed it before, because it was daytime that I'd always cross that threshold. It was night or early morning, I don't remember which. And it was dark, and so I tripped over this little bump in the at the threshold and fell flat on my nose, on my
Oh
nose.
my God.
Exactly. And when I looked up, the Swami was standing there, and he did nothing. He just kept looking at his phone while I was falling flat on my and
That's
then
very
all these
Swami
other,
like.
oh my god, he was such a devil. And then all these other people came rushing to help me and all that sort of stuff, and I said to him afterwards, you didn't even come and help me. And he's like, well, there were lots of other people. And I said, look, actually, it was my fault that I fell over, because if
Yeah.
I had been proceeding the way you walk, I would not have fallen over. I was
Right.
rushing, and you had shown me exactly the way to walk, and I had done something else, and that's why I landed flat on my face.
Right.
You know,
So come bringing this back to intentions and knowing
yeah.
that you're winning in the sense of moving toward what you know you need. Um, what's interesting is your response. You said that the depression happens automatically, and that's what we call
Mm,
sit. But I would even
mm,
go so far as to say the response of responding to my question of how do you know that you're winning with the response of, well, I'm human, as a, well, of course I'm going to have low times, um, is also a sit. So for those that don't know the acronym, sit is social indoctrination trauma. There's a video on it in the group. There's also a video on it in the neurodiverse operating system course. And I think it's my philosophy is that it's a completely indoctrinated way of thinking, to the point where what I'm about to point out with Raquel here is just an example, but we all have these examples, right? So the example that I notice, and I don't know if you saw it once I mentioned it, is like this defense, well, I'm a human, so I get to dip. And of course you do. I'm not saying you shouldn't dip. My question isn't how do you stop yourself from dipping? My question is, how do you know that even in the dip, you are focusing and continuing to make to ensure that you are better supporting those high value peak state times. We talked about it a bit on our last call, but I've really found a way to articulate it visually with Peter in his and my last call. I wish he was here today. Do you remember what we talked about?
No, I'll need a reminder.
Well, I'm going to do something here that may help, but also go back and check our call notes, because it was a big moment of a download for you when we were talking about it. And that might be why you need a reminder. So I'm going to start up a little whiteboard here. And let's say that you are, here, and that time goes forward like this. Now, when you're in, and let's just break this up into something so that we can talk about time in a way that makes sense. Let's say that this is about, I don't know, maybe a year from now, right? So how, and you got 6 months, 3 months, and your various quarters. So when you're in peak state, when you're moving in a direction where your energy is going up, that's wave fluorescent. We don't want to use that. That hurts my eyeballs. When we're moving in a direction where your energy is going up, where you have high power, so to speak, how far ahead do you think that you can see? Maybe not specifically, but
yeah, yeah. Well, you should be able to see a lot further ahead when you're in high power, theoretically.
Right. Do you feel that that's true?
I think so.
Yeah.
The reason I'm hesitating is when I'm thinking about the way people drive, and maybe that's not the right example, but I'm just so aware of that people drive either, one car ahead of themselves, or regardless of what their power is, I don't think they actually drive and look ahead on the road. And so that's where my mind went on that one.
Oh, maybe they're looking ahead in their own life instead of in their current moment.
Yeah, they certainly don't drive, looking, because sometimes when I'm driving in traffic and I'm noticing cars that are constantly lane switching, and I'm like, dudes, how far ahead did you look at the traffic? Could you not see that lane was not the lane to jump into? So that's why that was where my brain went when you asked that question. And maybe driving is a moment of low power for most people all the time now. So maybe that's why they can't see more than the car ahead of them.
Well, so how would you define high and low power then?
Yeah. So, wow.
I know we have a definition which is soon evolving, but it's an intuitive feeling. So I'm curious what aspects you see.
Yeah, so I think it is that capacity to be able to capture more information, right? So that's why I was like, I don't think
so. More awareness, right?
More awareness, exactly. Higher awareness, absolutely.
And clarity and bandwidth.
Clarity and bandwidth, yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I'm just realizing that I don't think anybody has on the road, which is why it looks the way it does.
Well, right. And so then social indoctrination trauma has basically told us messages like, I'm going to give some things away here. Social indoctrination trauma has told us messages like, you need to be on point. And if you're not, then you need to be more aware. And even people listening to this, right? Like they would say, am I more aware? Am I aware enough? And you even said so earlier, you have this depression starting to think about all the things that you would normally be doing in a state of high power when you're in a state of low power. So
that's right.
There's this natural anxiety that forms because of the the expectation to always be in high power.
Yeah.
And so even in your statement there, right? People on the road, I'm wondering if they're in high power, I'm wondering how true, whatever we were exploring was. And what I started to explore in my own head is they're not in high power, because high power, there's a very interesting juxtaposition, and you pointed at it. hinted at it, and that is that in a state of high power, I said it here, you know what you need.
Yeah.
But in a state of low power, I'm going to emphasize this, you're aware of what you need and able and have the energy for it.
Mm.
I'm trying to use some of our terms that we use.
Mhm.
But in a state of low power, you're aware of what you thought you needed.
Yeah, you start to lose contact with your needs.
And you don't have the energy for it.
Mm. And possibly even you start to become aware of other people getting their needs met and you not, like it's all of that sort of stuff as well. So you become more aware of other people and your failure to meet, to even equal them, let's say. So
Right.
that's that competition, or what do they call it? Imposter syndrome and all that sort of stuff starts to creep in. Mm.
Yeah. So you're more aware then of what you want, not what you need.
Yeah. Mm. Or what other people have, right? I don't even know if you're actually even aware of what you get. Sometimes, I think you even lose contact with yourself. I think,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
how
So it may not be the
overpowering.
same you. It may not be the same you, but it's like they
Mm.
have that. They have that.
Yes.
And there wouldn't be a sense of movement toward if there wasn't a desire for in some way. So
Yeah.
inherently, low power is scarcity.
Yes, that's right.
And high power is an abundant way of feeling. I'm not even going to say thinking, because you can't. Well, I
No,
believe that you
feeling.
can think your way into. I believe that you can think your way into abundance, but it's so counterintuitive. It's part of what I teach, but it's so
Yeah.
counterintuitive that I wouldn't say that anybody knows how yet, except for a
Yeah,
couple.
and I think probably it's actually more a combined state than perhaps you're even acknowledging, like that the harmony of the feeling and the thinking is actually so complete that you're naming it as thinking, but I would not be surprised if the feeling is actually harmonized in there.
It is. That's I'm going to say this for your benefit. Other people might be like, "Huh, what is that?" That's the value hierarchy. That's what that does. So now let's take this juxtaposition, and it creates a really interesting blind spot. Because when you are in a state of low power, you're more aware of what you want, not what you need. You're aware of what you thought you needed, even though you don't have the energy for it. And your intention becomes something from the past. It doesn't really, your intention in scarcity sort of offsets the gravity that you have during abundance. You see what I mean?
Say that again. Sorry, I got distracted by something else. Sorry.
It's okay. Oops, this is not a group. That's annoying. The feeling and kind of cognitive thought that you have in a state of scarcity offsets that of abundance. It's almost like you're feeling really good, and then your focus, like you said, it's a distraction.
Yep.
So then the question I like to ask everybody, the question I asked Peter and how we ended up in that really awesome state is, what is the cost
of not being of being in the low power state and
that's
distracted?
That's the sit interpretation, I would say. What's the
Yeah.
cost of not being clear on what you need and the aspects of it?
Gotcha. I see.
Because the truth is, if in this abundant state we knew what we needed and we had the energy for it, most of the time what we do is we do it, right? We just do the thing. We just are that.
Yeah.
But we don't really set ourselves up to do it in a low power state.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and I mean I'm a bit of that, because I generally have so much high power in my. I mean, I have low power moments, believe me, but when I have high power moments, I'm extremely effective. So I just sort of say, oh well, I'm having a low power day. It's all right, because when I have my next high power day, I'm going to do the work of 4 people, so it's all good.
Right, and I'm going to show you here how following up from our last call and intention setting and long-term, this sense of high power is really timeless if you use it right.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing is, if you don't set yourself up to get closer to that state, then you're just throwing time away when you're in a low power state. Because all these other, we know these things to be, we know these as what? We know them as blind spots, right? These are good examples of blind spots.
So are you saying, were you saying then that the best way to use your low power state is to prepare yourself for your next high power state? Is that what you're saying there?
Best way to use a high power state is to prepare yourself for a low power state.
Aha, so the other way around.
Bingo.
You don't use your high power state to do, you use your higher power state to prepare. So when the hell do your doing?
Well, you do your doing when it's most fitted to your mental state. So you haven't dug too deeply into the motivation matrix yet, and that's one of the tools that we use behind the scenes. But for those watching, there's a mind state that suits everything. Like administrative work, I would never use a high power state for that. Organizing stuff, I might use a high power state for that, especially if the things I'm organizing are really not clear to me at other times. And the truth is, you're not going to use even the polarity of your thought that I'm implying the word, and this is an English thing. This is an English language thing that I found. There's somebody in my life I used to get really frustrated about when they did this. And then I realized it's an English language problem, and a sit problem. Even the fact that you're thinking that I'm saying only.
Sure.
So
yeah.
In a high power state, you're not only preparing yourself for a low power state, but what you are doing.
No, I was using that more illustratively. I mean, I get that.
And I'm saying that not only for you, but what we are doing is we are framing how we do things so that when we're in a low power state, the aspects of what we need that we can't see because of our blind spots are more accessible. I'll give you a practical example, and then I'm actually going to answer this question of what's the cost before we get off here. So practical example, a lot of the people watching may not, but I have like a bajillion whiteboards to my right. In fact, one of them slides left and right to make room. So when I'm in a high power state, what I'll do is I'll see all of this. And this is, I think a lot of people do this, especially ADD or autistic people. I'll see all of the answers to all of the questions I've been asking for the past 2 weeks or something. It's like everything crystallizes. And I want to just do it. And I want to be that. And I want that to manifest. And so I've come to recognize that state is temporary. And in that high power state, it's incredibly hard to acknowledge that without all the story that comes with it. But after what I show you, this will make a lot more sense. And I'm going to show you numerically in a minute the actual cost of not doing this. So, and you've seen this before, but not like this. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to get into how this came about, but it was a fascinating conversation that I'm going to share with you when I can get it to upload. So what I do is I recognize one really important thing that you will appreciate a lot, but I don't think have linked to this. Failure to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah, my dad used to say that all the time.
I'm sorry I did that to you, but I'm not sorry, because and do you recognize the truth of that, or is that just bringing up stuff for you?
Oh no, I've actually my wheels have been turning while you've been setting this up, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I missed that.
Well, that's why I do these sessions, honestly, because they're great follow-ups from our calls as clients, but they're also great little, like, I want to know how you do that for people that aren't clients. So failure to plan is planning to fail. Now, you know that regardless of whether you're in high power or low power, because when you're in low power, what do? You start to think about all the things that you need to do and you start to plan. So this is you already know that if you're not organized, it's going to be ineffective. So I just take that as a truth. No matter where I am here, I take that as a truth, and I make it I make it a goal of mine, more like a way of being at this point, to
Right.
ensure that I plan before I start anything. So if I'm getting all these downloads, I just get them all out. I get them on sticky notes or on a white. That's why I have so many whiteboards. I just get all the ideas out. And usually that leaves me with even more power because now I've created bandwidth. And then
Yeah.
I just follow the fucking plan.
Yeah, gotcha.
So when we talk about convergence and divergence and a state of awareness and is that a
I'm
laugh or
laughing because it's laughing because you want to know what the other thing my dad used to say.
you'll tell me, I'm sure.
Plan your work and work your plan.
That's what this is. So when we talk about convergence and
I'm laughing. I can't
when we
believe it.
well, I'm happy to reincarnate your father. When we
I know, thank you.
when we have a state of high power, it almost looks like we can see like the circle of awareness is bigger, right? And when we have a state of low power, it's a lot smaller of a circle. Well, gee, doesn't that look like how we model the aspects of convergence and divergence?
Yeah.
So what we can do when we're in a state of high power is see ahead and begin to take all the little pieces that make up the plan. And in the value hierarchy video, I think I've sent you. If I haven't, I'll send it to you. I'll edit your last notes and add it. But in the advanced value hierarchy, I think I talk about time horizon as it relates to the value hierarchy, which isn't, I don't get into the value hierarchy here on the lives, but you know about it. And I paint a pretty cool picture of how it gives you a sense of how to organize this stuff and how it's like an arrow moving through time so that we can, in this state of high power, now we have all the pieces. I've stuck all the sticky notes to the whiteboard. But all of a sudden, now my power level shrinks down and if I didn't stick all the notes to the whiteboard, if I didn't get all those aspects out, now what am I doing? I'm wondering how long they'll take. I'm trying to remember what it was like in this state. I'm comparing myself to other people. So how is this landing for you? I'm about to transition to
So the piece that's landing for me that I can't quite put together yet is my piece, which is the nervous system piece. Because what I do know is that when I'm in a state of high power, what I really want to do is do, right? And that's a nervous system state. It's not actually, so let's say it's a nervous system compulsion is a better word of saying it. So it's actually, it requires a bit of retraining and restraint. Which I have done. I've learned to do. I used to, for example, when I used to write emails, I couldn't stop and read. This is many years ago. I couldn't stop and read what I'd written because I was in such haste to send what I'd written. So that I knew that was a nervous system state that I had got. You know, it's like I needed to get that thing out and I needed to get it sent and it needed to be done. And over the years, you know, I trained myself to actually be fine with rereading over an email, you know, and I did that by starting out by not sending an email, you know, and going back to it the next day, etc. And now I can, in real time, write an email, reread over it, edit it, check it, whatever, and be really relaxed about sending it. So that was how I trained myself in that. But I can see that there's that nervous system compulsion to do rather than plan existing within this thing. So that's going to require a bit of training on my part.
And tell me if this hits for you, right? You said retraining and restraint. What if we reframe? I just made this up on the spot. So if it doesn't stick, let me know. For you to be able to restart.
Yes, exactly. Because the going, I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm going now, and I don't want to stop. Yeah, so I'm terrible. I'm crap with Pomodoro, for example, because I hate stopping and starting.
Well, right, and that's why it's a practice, not a right.
That's right. I know. And so these days, what I do at the moment, I'm like, when I take a break, I take a 30-minute break and I go
Yeah,
and do something else. I go and do something else.
Raquel, I woke up this morning at 5 o'clock. I didn't start work until 7. I worked until 4 and I took a 2.5 hour nap. And I did Pomodoro the whole block through. And then I was like, you know what? That 15 minutes is not enough time. And now I'm here. You can do
Yeah.
that. Like, you're allowed to do it. But so what's the cost of not for you
Not
of not
planning.
reframing and restarting and setting yourself up to restart? That's the
Yeah.
question that you're asking.
So that's where yes. So that's when I because I don't have a plan, I get lost and I don't know what
I'm
I'm
going to give
so
you some incentive to do this. And I know that you have the rationality part that, and I know that so this is where I like to say you can use your biases or your shadows or your blind spots to your advantage. I haven't
Yes.
taught this really in that
No,
context
but
at all.
I understand that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So check this out. So
Mhm.
you've heard the 1% concept, right? If you do 1% better,
Yes.
you've heard me say this. So
Yeah,
what's
for
the
sure.
what's
Yeah.
what's the factor if you do 1% better? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Well,
I don't
okay,
I
that's
don't
part.
I don't need to remember those things. I just know I do better. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So if you do 1% better, you're doing approximately 36 times better at the end of a year.
That's right. Yeah.
And these numbers are a little bit important, and you'll see why. And you may not need to remember the number, but I think the impact will land. If you do
Mm.
1% worse,
Mm.
you do 1% worse, you're 3% of where you started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
you go backwards slowly and go forwards fast, is what you're saying
and
there.
it's only a third of what I'm saying here. The
Mm-hmm.
very the sub what I'm saying here, like the implication
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm saying here is far bigger
Mm.
because in your mind you already said the thing about when you're in scarcity, which is I know I'll have low power, right?
Yeah.
I'll just give today a pass, something like that, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So we have to look at the cost of not having systems that set you up
Mm.
to restart your abundant state. And so if we look at that,
Mm.
if you're not seeing it, you will in just a sec.
Mm.
If we're looking at that and we're here and we're starting and we go through all these aspects, the way compounding works is it's exponential. So our potential after a year is 3,600%
Yeah.
if we stay on point. And we can stay on
Mm.
point in a low state. Like when I'm in a low power state, the only thing I do is pick up my notes from when I made in a high power state or sleep. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if I'm in a low power state, so too is the cost exponential. And it looks like it, in our minds, we're like, oh, it's just a bad day. I can make up for it the next day. But when we look at the math, what we're actually doing is we're paying.
Mm.
Trying to adjust some things here. We are paying 97%, or a potential
Mm-hmm.
97%.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
exchanging
Yeah.
97%. So
Mm.
we're saying, hey, this 97% isn't a big deal. And you're right, it's not. The splurge that you make every now and again, or the unconscious spending people make every now and again. And I'm not saying you do, but if
Mm-hmm.
you do, or if others who are watching do, yeah, it's not a big deal. But what you're exchanging
Mm.
is for the possibility, of 3,600%.
Right.
So is your 97% worth more than almost 10? Is it 10 times? Yeah, more than 10 times its value.
4 times. Mm. 10 times.
97.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
3,600
Yeah.
divided
No,
by
you're right. Yeah.
97. I'm just
Yeah.
going to figure this out. Is 37 times. So that's where I get the 37x, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the question becomes, is I'm not going to say failure to plan because that's so generic and dad, but is not is not honoring your abundance, not honoring your clarity of abundance.
Yeah. It's not
Honoring.
honoring the state of abundance you're in, right? Is that what you're saying there?
Not just the state of abundance that you're in, but when you're in this state of clarity,
Mm.
and when you're in this state of what you call magnetism, like you went to India. What did you start this conversation talking about? You went to India, you felt amazing. You want to replicate that. What was our last call about? You went to India, you felt amazing. You want to replicate that. You need to be there. You're clear on what you need and you have the energy to do it.
Mm.
But here,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not even going to call these excuses, because the truth is, yeah, you do know you're going to have low power and you can give today a pass. And that's true. And that's not even not honoring your abundance. But if you don't document these aspects of what abundance looks, feels, and is like, so that when you're in that state of low power, you can, I think I put this somewhere, you can magnetize this state.
Mm.
So what you're doing, the reason you feel magnetic and the reason people are drawn to you is because they are. But now you need to draw yourself to you through time too.
Mm-hmm.
So is not honoring the clarity that you have during abundance worth 36 times of what you spend?
No.
In scarcity? You're right. So there's your motivation.
Mm.
It's like all of a sudden when you're in that scarcity state, you look, maybe you can't see a year down the road, but that's what I remind myself of. And there's other equations that we can use. This is a very general, just to give you the impact of the blind spots here, right? These blind spots create this. And there's more elegant ways, you know, in our work that we can handle them, things like the value hierarchy, things like the energy economics equations and things like that. But when you, a real reality check is, and sometimes I'll even still use this equation on myself if I can't connect to anything else, because I'm just that not there today. I'm like, wow, is me like not doing, like, sometimes I'm only mentally capable of maybe data entry, like just boring, monotonous stuff, right? Is me not doing that worth the whole reason I set that project in motion to start with, which is ultimately looking a year down the road and the possibility, you know? So it puts me in a state where I feel as though, let's take $36, they suddenly become $1. Let's take, actually, I think, yeah, let's take 1 hour, it suddenly becomes the value of, or let's take 1 minute, suddenly becomes 1 hour. And that's what happens when you're in a low power state. You procrastinate, time gets longer. So you're literally in a state, what is scarcity? It's the state of slowing down. It's entropy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which means the value for you isn't about avoiding scarcity, because you're gonna be. Both of these statements are true, but they're incomplete.
Mm.
What do you think the most important thing then is as a strategy for moving forward, given this polarity that you've been experiencing and what others experience too?
What is the most important thing? Sorry, say the rest of the question.
Strategy. So the most important strategy to manage all of this. In other words, it's not about avoiding a low power state, which is where everybody operates from, and even where you've been operating from. What is it really about?
Well, I think you've already said it, haven't you? Is that you want to utilize your high power state for planning for your low power state.
Yep. And said another way, we want to reduce the cost of a lack of awareness.
Right.
Is it making sense?
Which is planning, Which is planning, right?
It's planning, and that could get us into the intellectual side of, well, what is planning? How do I need to set? Is it SMART goals do I need to set? And what if I don't meet them? And what's the shame in that? But ultimately,
So
if
maybe it's foresight then, or something like that, which is the awareness thing.
this is the exploration.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a little shortcut for your sake. The value hierarchy is a great way to do that because it creates the awareness of all of your emotions and all of your states across all of your states. And if you can pinpoint where you are, you can see where you aren't.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a way to use that. And then you can use the tools like Pomodoro or like Getting Things Done or Inbox Zero. Those are low power state tools. You don't need them in an abundant state.
Right.
But it's to satisfy this strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason that I use them. That's literally the only reason I use them. Because I'll tell you, most days when I get up super early, by noontime, I'm tapped, but I need to keep going.
Yeah.
So that's not true for everybody, but does this help?
It does. I mean, like it leaves me with the and I think it's a perception thing, but it's so I'm kind of incorrect as I say it, but I have this perception that I only do in that in those high powered states. So what you're saying is bring more awareness to the doing or the opportunity to do in the low power states. And so I'm sure that I do. I mean, I definitely do when I'm in low power, but I have this whole expectation that I should only do in the high power states, or as you said, there's days when I will give it a pass. So it's I guess it's about evening things out a little bit, and it's evening things out.
It is about evening things out. And let me add a little bit more nuance to that. You're using the clarity that you have in high power to inform low power. If you're operating from the place of doing in low power without the clarity from your high power state, that's ultimately why you've learned not to do in your low power state.
Yeah, and what makes everything really slow. Yeah.
And that will make it slow. So if I'm in a low power state and I'm just following whatever I feel like doing, it will make stuff slow because that's the nature of it. But if I have, I don't even like the word plan because plans never go according to plan. That's why I use the word intention. If I have an intention and I follow that intention, and actually, if you haven't seen the video in the group on intention setting that I did last week, go check it out because I think I put it in Slack too. There's a guide, a little PDF like document where it's like intention setting isn't all this stuff that people say it is or isn't.
It's not goal setting.
No. And it doesn't even need to have a time attached because plans never go according to plan. So it's just this idea of I like to say it's like Robin Hooding yourself. And I started back in the day when I was doing money stuff, I started using that, and nobody can bridge this time distillation gap in their head until they start doing this work. Like you're able to now, and I think it's because of the mindset mastery practices and all these other things, but it's a very hard concept for the mind, especially with sit involved, to wrap itself around. But once you do, it makes total sense. You're Robin Hooding yourself. You're taking from your abundant states to give to your poor states. And if you don't do that, you're just in poverty. And that you've learned appropriately so that if you're in poverty, that's not the time to act.
Yep. Yeah. Gotcha.
But it's a limited picture because of what that does. It zooms you into the current moment.
Yeah. And it actually feeds into that whole idea of the optimal only state of true, value as a being is the high power state.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what's contributing then to the sit, which is what you're saying, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for me, because I studied things like sociology and anthropology and psychology and studies of religion and all those sorts of things, but I think back to my early sociology studies, about how things changed with industrialization. And I remember arguing with my peers that not all forward motion is progress. And, the industrialized view is that is what progress is, forward motion. And I would say is like, well, why is not going backwards also progress? right? Because we can get a lot of information from, and we might substitute that with slow state, right? Or low
Slow or
power
flow?
state.
Oh, low power state. Yeah.
Low or low power state, right? Is so it's the same thing. You know, it's like it never made sense to me why everybody was prioritizing the forward motion, i.e. high power, when in fact there's a huge amount of value, information, education, all sorts of things in that backwards motion, or, you know, low power.
Yeah.
We don't have to consider it even as low power. Like it's a high value state, even if we're going backwards.
Right. And think about, I'm going to leave you with this because I have another call in 10 minutes here. Think about what happens. What do we call these two states normally? Fight and flight, or fight
That's
or
right.
flight, and rest and digest. Well, what are you digesting? If you are in rest and digest, you're digesting what you put in during the high power state.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there, right? We just have to
integration. You know, it's value. Like it's really important that we have time for integration and preparation, right?
Yep.
Same sort of thing.
Same stuff. So do you have any questions, or are there any obvious blind spots in what I presented that somebody just kind of seeing this material might have, or any questions that you have before I go?
No, I mean, I think there's lots of places where somebody who has never seen this material before might trip up, because it is really complex, and it does take time to embody it, understand it, have those little aha light bulb moments, and you know, and it's a continual process. So I think, you know, to expect understanding even from, you know, from this wonderful way that you've passed this out, you know, it's probably too difficult to do that. It's a matter of probably repeating, going back over this sort of stuff time and time again, because even I need to do that, because, you know, I'm sitting here going, oh, those bloody numbers, right? So there's my blind spot, is like, exactly like for you, it made a heap of sense about the 37 times. For me, it didn't really land in my body. It was just it was a number floating around in the ether that I'm like, oh fuck, it's like a balloon I'm trying to catch.
You know of opportunity cost, yeah? You can feel that?
Yeah.
So it is, I won't even use the numbers then. It's like your opportunity cost suddenly gets, let's call it,
it's heavy. I can feel it. It's
an
really
hour
heavy.
long, a minute turns into an hour, right?
Like holding it's a lead balloon. I can feel it. It's like holding a lead balloon.
And that's just the cost of not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
In that low power state. Yeah. So we try to bridge the two. And I think you're right. Like, these are complicated things, which is why I was able to take the combination, you know, that chart I put in Slack. Nobody watching has seen this, but the chart I put in Slack with the tools, that's the 12-year calendar of content. You know, like, it's going to take time. People have to get multiple exposures. And so I think, you know, you've done a great job of being willing to share what's going on for you. And I'm going to keep doing these calls. That you see the announcements in the group. So I really appreciate you showing up today. I would have done this one way or the other, but having your participation was really helpful. It really helps to have somebody, another human being to human with. And I would suggest for you, you mentioned going back and rewatching, and even you have to do it. So I would say go back after seeing this, go back and check out our last session and see what you see, because you shared some really deep stuff in there, and it's all parallel to this.
Yes, it is. Yes, I see that.
And you were just getting back, so it was a great time.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Well,
thanks, Chris.
Thank you. And thank you guys, whoever's watching this in the group. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I check comments every day, if not every other day, if not every day. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you.